I want to talk about echoes. It's a subject that I've brought up from time to time. You could say it's echoed through my materials, but you can search upwardthought.org if you want to pick up some more references to this. I know, for example, I did a presentation which I believe was called Impulses and Echoes, and that's very related and very important. So I was catching up on a series of videos today by a few of my friends, and I'm not 100% sure why they decided to start sharing their thoughts online, thoughts about life and God. But it might be the case that something I said had something to do with it. I've strongly encouraged people to share what God has taught them with other people. And I think there's a whole basket of things that would make that undesirable for people. But one of them might be that you could see that only four people have watched your video and say, wow, that's really not worth my time. I want to address this in a few ways. One, and then we'll get to other things. So stay tuned. If you had four people that were willing to come to your house and sit in your living room and allow you, let's say the video is 25 minutes long, allow you to share your heartfelt thoughts for 25 minutes with something that's very important to you, that you had every reason to believe would make their life measurably better, wouldn't you do it? Wouldn't you invite those four people over? Well, what if you didn't know who those four people were? Well, you can make a video. And if it's worth it to do it with four people in your living room, why wouldn't it be worth it to do it with four people on the internet? And how much more if it's 6 people or 10 people? But let's go the other way. Like, would you avoid a conversation with a single person that was going to change their lives? So now let's pivot to another reason, which might be that maybe you don't think that what you have to say is very important. And I'd ask you, is it important to you? What difference has it made in your life? I have a friend who I care about very much who is in construction. And I told him once, I said, I can't even imagine having 20 years of dedicated experience in something, because the path I've been on has changed around so much from time to time, the professional path. And I guess the different jobs have sort of rhymed with each other in a way, but they've been very different. And I can't even imagine, when I do construction, I can't imagine how much more I would understand about it if I could do that for 20 years straight. And so the last time he was over, I think it was the last time, I made a mental note and I actually remembered, which is great, but I took him to this little shed thing that I had been building. And I said, here's one thing that I just can't figure out. And here's my best idea, but I wanted to know what you thought about it. And he gave me the most brilliant idea. And it was just like he was picking his nose. It was so easy, right? He didn't even have to think about it. He's like, yeah, well, I'd probably do this. It looks a million times better than the best thing I could come up with, because I went with his advice, of course. How do you know? I mean, let me approach this from two ways now, sort of rehashing what I just said. On the one hand, if it's valuable to you, why wouldn't you assume that it was valuable to other people? And that's the easier one. The other one is, maybe it's not valuable to you because you've progressed so far beyond that one idea that it's just sort of old hat for you. If I applied that standard to decide whether I did what I do, you would have nothing from me. In many ways, every single thing that I've published, it's like getting in a time machine and going back a long time, and time's not the best way to measure it. Just going back a very long way. Or infinitely zooming on this tiny, tiny, tiny little thing that to me is just not even worth talking about, because there's so much better things to talk about that build on that, and you have to understand that first, but it can be the most painful thing, actually. It can be the hardest thing. And you feel like you're, I don't know, on those little kiddie sheets when you're teaching a kid how to write and it's a dashed line, it's a cheap newsprint, and they have to draw the letter A 4,000 times. That's what it can feel like. And so I don't say these things to complain. I'm saying them to say what feels like that to you might be an earth-shattering revelation to other people. And it's very hard for you to see that ahead of time. You just have to share it. And what I've told young people, I've had a lot of young people work for me, my various professional positions. And I always try to help them get another job when the time comes. I always did, I should say. It's all past tense now. And I always told them, look, don't disqualify yourself. Leave that for other people. If you see a job that you would take, apply for it. Even if maybe you're not the best fit for what they have described in the job application. Just let them decide that. And sure enough, it happens where people get hired and either they had a different position they didn't list, or they really like the person. They say, we can make this work. You're such a good person. I'd rather have you and train you on what you don't know than have someone I don't like who knows the stuff already, whatever the case may be. But don't disqualify yourself. Let other people do that. So when you're producing things, just produce it. And what that means, it doesn't have to be a YouTube video, an Instagram post, or something on X or whatever. It can just be what you say to people face to face, like you strike up a conversation on the bus and you just start talking about what you value and see what they value. And I'll be saying a lot more about that to help you flesh that out. We'll be drawing the letter A many more times. But yeah. So, another thought I wanted to share about these echoes. So I produced some material that said, hey, share your thoughts with other people. Share what you believe, share why, especially share your reasons. And try to chop these things down and help other people see what's important to you. And you never know what's going to happen. Well, now I'm going to get into physics a little bit. It turns out with the physics of light, there's a lot of limited understanding in mainstream physics. And so I looked this up because most of the times when God teaches me something, there are 15 other people who have dedicated their lives and eventually discovered what God just sort of told me. And it helps me sort of flesh out what I don't yet understand in that idea. And this has happened so many times that I can't even tell you. And so one of these things was on light, specifically how objects emit light. And they emit light in response to receiving light. Now what's interesting is that, and I'm getting way too much into the weeds on this, but physicists talk about reflection, and that's not actually how it works. When an object gets hit with energy, let's just zoom out from light specifically, but let's just talk in general terms. When an object gets hit with energy, one of the possible responses is that it will emit energy. And that energy is not always the same kind of energy that it gets in. You use this every day. You flip a light switch on and electricity is going to a light bulb and then it's emitting light. It received electricity, it's emitting light. And those are all sort of the same thing, but let's not get bogged down. Metals are really interesting. You can hit them with certain kinds of energy, you'll get other kinds of energy back. People are absolutely like this. So if you hit a person with light and truth, they will respond. And sometimes that response is to ignore you. Sometimes it's to fight you. And that fight can be at different levels of intensity. There are things you can say to somebody that will cause them to want to kill you. Just swear an oath that they won't rest until you're dead. And there are a lot of things you can say and people just think, oh, that's an arrogant a-hole, So there's a whole spectrum. Now, there are also positive reactions where people can say, huh, that's interesting, or yeah, I've heard this before, even if they haven't, or well, that's not a very big deal, everybody knows that, even if they don't, or that's an answer to a question I've had for a very long time, or I've actually been praying intently to God and fasting for many days to know that, or wow, that completely changes my life. Or, you get the point. These are all emissions of light in response to received light. But we've discussed all the ones that are directed to where it came from. So let's talk about the ones that go the other way, all of the other ways, right? So what do you do as a response to light that's emitted to you? Do you say, wow, that's great, whatever, your positive reaction to the person who gave it to you, but then sit on it and you don't change anything in your life? Or do you take forever to make a tiny little change? Or do you not even get started on a really big change forever? You delay forever getting started on a big change. Or do you look at all the different interactions you have with people in your life where that would be relevant, and you say, well, I'm too much of a wuss to do most of these, or it would cause too much pushback, too much trouble for me, I'm not doing it. These are part of the range of possible responses. And they're echoes. There's an impulse and there are echoes in response. Now what's awesome is when you share things and then you see the downstream echoes and you see how much better suited those are to the people that it reaches. So right now, I could give the absolute best sermon, if that's what you want to call it, on any gospel topic, doesn't matter what. It could be perfect, it could be perfectly produced, it could be 5 minutes long, everything could be perfect. The most common response to that, even from people who say, I would give anything to know the answer to this one question that video perfectly answers. The most common response is going to be that they're going to Google who I am. And most of what will come up on a Google search is very bad. And most of it's false, but a lot of it's true. And I'll totally own almost anything I've ever said. I have better ideas about some things now. But they'll say, this one thing doesn't agree with what I think, and therefore I'm going to throw away potentially the answer to the question I have, or the solution to the problem I have, or the thing that I say I want that I don't have, because it doesn't agree with who I am and what I think and how I feel right now. And that's how most people are. The only way to get through that barrier is if different people have the same idea and they share that idea without all the baggage. The more light and truth that you have, and the more light and truth that you share, the more marred you become. And what does that word mean in the scriptures? It has two meanings. One of them is that it's one of ceremonial uncleanliness in the perception of the people. In other words, this is the last person that I would expect to have the solution to my problem, to know the answer to my question, or to show me how to get what I want and don't have. You are not marred. There are so many people out there who, outside of religion, can pick up a cause and they're squeaky clean. There's no dirt on them, so to speak, that nefarious people could twist to make them look bad without actually addressing what they're saying. For me, that's very easy to do. And every single thing I say or do makes it even easier, right? If you haven't said anything publicly, you're squeaky clean. And if you don't have things from your past that could be dredged up, because this is a big problem for a lot of people, they do have things from their past. They could be dismissed out of hand by dishonest people who say, well, this guy used to be a crackhead. What does he know? You know, it's like, well, if he's teaching about how Jesus can redeem you from being a crackhead, that's actually relevant experience. It should go on your resume, right? Anyway, but there are things obviously that people can pull out and say, well, you know. So that's the value of what you can share. And so it gives me great joy to see the ideas that God has given me flow out to other people and flow out to the world through them. The last thing I want to say about this, that is one of the reasons why I bothered telling you about how the fact that light is not reflected, it's emitted in response to light, but it's emitted all the same. As the light comes out, you lose control over it. And what do I mean by that? Well, there are things that God has revealed through me that are in the wild, so to speak, and many, many, many people will hear about them and have no idea that it had anything to do with a guy named Rob Smith. And that's wonderful. That's wonderful, because the point isn't me. The point is Jesus and whoever is hearing the light and truth for themselves. That's the point. Now, there does come a point where if you're looking for cleaner water, you have to go upstream. But for the most part, the initial progress, and unfortunately for most people, the final progress, has everything to do just with the ideas. And when you make these videos and you see, well, only 4 people saw this, who cares? It's out there. And once it's out there, you don't have any ability to measure how far it's gone or the difference it's made. You'll only know after you die. And so it's a wonderful opportunity to exercise faith and to be concerned more with good than credit for it. The good you do rather than the credit you get for it. Now, Jesus said that if you love if you love people who give you good things, what reward do you have? Is that really love? Or is that just being shrewd? Why wouldn't you love someone who gives you things, right? But if you love your enemies, that is love, because they don't give you anything but grief for the love that you give them. And they give you greater grief the more you love them. It's impossible to love someone without giving them weapons to hurt you. In the same way, if you had a following of 100,000 people who devoured your every word, it wouldn't be as easy to know your motives in doing that. But if no one sees your stuff and no one seems to care, and you do it anyway, caveat, big caveat, and you're not setting aside obviously more important things in your life to do it. If you're a mother of 4 young children and you're like, kids, you're just going to have to fend for yourselves tonight because I got to make a video about, whatever. Look, that's not cool. But if your cup runs over and God has helped you to manage your responsibilities in your physically interactive life such that you have more to give and more to share, just do it. Just do it. And let the consequences flow, and you're building a treasure in heaven for the day when your true impact has been revealed. And when that day comes, if your heart's in the right place, it's still not going to be about getting credit. It's going to be about seeing the joy of God in the lives of other people to a greater extent, and knowing that you had something to do with that, not for credit, but for, I guess, the evidence it shows of how much you appreciated it from God, that you cared enough to share it with someone else, even if you couldn't see the direct impact of that. I'll end with an analogy. So in the military, we had the kind of guns that you shoot yourself, not shoot yourself with, but that you fire yourself. So a pistol or a rifle or even a machine gun. And all of those are called direct fire weapons because you aim and you try to shoot the things that you see. But they're indirect fire weapons. And guess what? They're way bigger. These are the big artillery shells. And you don't shoot those line of sight. They shoot in a big arc. And you can shoot them over a mountain range because they go so far. But they're really big shells. Okay, these are big old bullets that you shoot, right? Or sometimes they're explosives, whatever they are. But they're really big shells. When you fire the big shells, it's not about the impact that you see. You just shoot them where you're told, and you trust that the people calling the shots know what they're doing. Jesus calls the shots, and he knows what he's doing. And so when he teaches you something and it's valuable to you, go share it with other people in whatever opportunities you have. And the impacts from that will echo out in ways that you cannot see. But eventually, you will absolutely experience the joy of that. And in some ways, the less you see now, the more joy you will have then.